So each one of these recipes that I'm gonna share with you takes about 20 minutes or less to cook. And then I've got a bonus recipe at the end that you probably can make in about 5 minutes. And when I say I don't have a lot of time, I mean it. What I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna try to cook all 4 of these recipes and film them within the next hour and a half. It's gonna take for my girls to be down at nap. So I got 2 under 2, and when they whine, I gotta go. So we better get started. So the first recipe I'm gonna make is your standard stir fry. And this is one of those recipes that if you know how to make nothing else, it's pretty hard to mess this up. What I love about a stir fry and what I love about a lot of recipes is that you can modify them and make them whatever you want. For this particular stir fry, I'm gonna use chicken. And what I'm doing here is I'm just trimming off. And this is a fillet knife or a meat knife. And I'm just trying to take some of these larger hunks of fat off, help with decreasing calories a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this into strips. Now, the main thing is I want them to be somewhat similar, and so that way I won't get one piece that's like really overcooked and dried out. I don't have my normal salt stand. And one thing you'll learn about me when I'm cooking here in this kitchen, although I do most of the cooking, my wife really likes organizing and changing where stuff is in the kitchen. So sometimes I don't know where everything's at, even in my own kitchen. All right, so I got a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and I can build that flavor some later on, but I'm just gonna go ahead and get this in the pan and get it going. If you watch the cutting video, you remember me slicing up some stuff for stir fry, some onions and peppers. Let me go get those. All right, so pre-prepping ingredients is one of my favorite hacks. If I can do all this and get this cutting board out and do a bunch of stuff all at once, like maybe say on a Sunday or a Saturday, then anytime that it comes during the week when I don't have a lot of time and I don't have that extra luxury after work or whatever to get something on the table, I can pull those out really quick. And before I get roasted for having this ancient looking peeler, I want you to know my great-great-great-grandpappy brought this over on the Mayflower, and it's a family heirloom, and I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna kind of cut them a little bit more into strips. So what I'm trying to do is just get a little bit of color, get it up to temp so I don't have to worry about the food safety aspect of it. And speaking of temp, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check the temp real quick here. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for it to get to 165 internal temperature or above. So I'm gonna take these, set them over to the side. But what I am gonna do is I'm gonna leave those juices in there because that's flavor. And I'm gonna go ahead and finish up prepping all the rest of my ingredients. Go ahead and get that garlic in, get it started, get it going. I'm also going to, at this time, go ahead and get ready and start putting some onion in. And I'm gonna let these cook down a little bit more, move everything to the side, get a little bit more of my olive oil, and let that kind of start to cook down. So you'll notice I'm probably not going to actually be able to use all of these ingredients, so I've cut a little bit more than I need, and that's okay, because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually save those, and I can use those later on for something else. So one thing about a real traditional stir fry is you typically have relatively high heat, and you're moving it around. They call it a stir fry because you stir it. Go figure. And you'll notice, like with these veggies, I haven't added any real seasoning or anything yet because I'm gonna use a sauce. I'm gonna make that sauce next. And so that's gonna create a lot of seasoning. And then I can always add salt at the end to bring out a lot of the flavors that I've tried to create. So after I took my veggies off, one thing that I did was I went ahead and turned my pan off. And so now I'm gonna build the heat back up. I'm gonna keep it on a little bit lower this time. I don't want this sauce to burn. Soy sauce is kind of always gonna be like your basis for any stir fry sauce. Or sesame seed oil, I always recommend that you use just a tiny bit. It doesn't take very much to really overpower the dish, and you don't want to make that mistake. So I'm just going to use a tiny bit of that. I'm also going to use a little bit of rice vinegar, and now I can start to go ahead and get this up, and I'm going to try to get it up to a simmer. I'm just keeping this one as simple as possible because I don't want it to be too many ingredients where it feels overwhelming. Next thing I'm going to add a little bit of hoisin sauce. Now this is going to be my sweetness. This is used in a lot of different Chinese dishes and a lot of different stir fry. And one thing that I would typically add to this would be cornstarch. For whatever reason, I can't find the cornstarch. I'm actually going to add a little bit of flour here in just a minute, and that kind of serves that purpose of thickening it up a little bit. Now I'm gonna crank the heat all the way up, and I'm just gonna continue to stir fry. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just throw in and add a little bit more salt. A lot of times people are weary of using salt, and they say, oh, salt's not healthy. Believe it or not, only about 17 to 18% of all the sodium that we consume is actual table salt. Most of it comes from processed goods. Don't be afraid to put salt onto your dishes, because what salt does more than anything is it brings out all of those wonderful flavors. I found that using this wrap right here, these wraps are a little bit hard, sometimes they're hard to find. This particular wrap is fairly low calorie. It doesn't give you a ton of carbs, so if you're keto or you're trying to watch your carbs or trying to watch your calories overall, anytime that I'm picking a wrap, I'm trying to avoid hydrogenated oils, so I try to avoid them as much as I possibly can, and this particular one doesn't have it in it. This is just delicious. Feel free to use this recipe, throw it over rice, throw it over noodles. Let's get into the next one. So this next recipe that I'm gonna show you is one that I stole from a local restaurant here in North Carolina. It's a fried salmon salad recipe. And I know you're thinking, fried salmon, fried? Yeah, exactly. I've never had fried salmon either. Most of the time when you're having salmon, it's gonna be grilled or blackened. When I had this, I was like, that is so different than anything I've ever had. And sometimes with recipes, if we can make it simple, we can make it quick, but we can make it interesting and a little bit different than what we've had before. It keeps things fresh. Okay, so while my pan is heating up, I'm gonna go ahead and get my breading ready. Now, for this breading, what you see here, I've got a bag. And what this is this is leftover flour and leftover cornmeal that I had. And so I just combined them, and it makes a great breading for almost any kind of meat, but especially fish. If you're gonna do any kind of fried fish or you ever buy any store-bought, that's pretty much what it is. It's mixed with those two things. I have a salmon seasoning that I found that I really like, and so I'll share that one with you. Magic salmon seasoning, not super expensive, easy to find at most grocery stores. A lot of times people will say, well, I thought fried fish was bad for you. I want us to get away so much from the idea of good food, bad food. Eating healthy is really about balance, and it's about how often you're eating those, you know, quote unquote bad foods. By putting it over a bed of nice fresh greens and a salad, we're getting a great balance. Don't be afraid to eat stuff that's fried every once in a while. Go ahead and start the salad, because that way, as soon as this is finished, one thing about fish is it doesn't take very long to cook, and fish also is best served fresh and hot. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make my own dressing off the stuff I have here, and I'll go ahead and tell you, I don't have anything that I normally would want to use, so it's going to be interesting to see how this one turns out. I love balsamic vinegar, and so I love the base of balsamic vinegar. Typically, I would use some form of brown mustard or mustard seed powder if I didn't have that, but I don't have mustard seed powder. I don't know where it's at, and I don't have brown mustard, so I'm going to throw a little bit of regular yellow mustard, not a lot. In the other recipe, we used a light olive oil because we didn't want it to burn. For this one, I'm going to use a pure olive oil because it's going to be a dressing. I'm not going to be cooking with it. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to start slowly adding a little bit. It's starting to kind of thicken up a little bit, and that's what I'm looking for. And I may have made a little bit too much dressing. It's okay though. A little bit too much is fine, and I need to eat more greens anyway, right? I'm gonna use a spring mix. That's really my favorite salad to use. And let's just go ahead and, you know, get a good bit. And you see this is like that nice brown color. That comes from not having your oil too hot. I could have maybe had it a tad bit hotter, but it's okay. It's gonna work really good. And that's why I say, like with cooking, we always try to make the best better. So we always are continuing to get better as we cook. And every time it's not gonna turn out like the best time you've ever cooked it. What I'm doing now is I'm throwing in a little bit of chia seeds. All right, so I'm gonna set that aside, and then I'm gonna get my strawberries. Now, I like something fresh on here or something a little bit fruity, but we're getting into strawberry season here in North Carolina. And so I always try to eat as much local stuff as possible. Okay, so similar with the chicken, I always cook meat based off a temp. Okay, so I know that is definitely done. Anytime you're cooking fish, you want it to get to 145. This one's about 150, 160, so I've overcooked it a little bit, but it's okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off, and I need to grab me a plate, right? Okay, so last thing to do for this salad is I've just got to plate it. A little bit of color there. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. To add a little bit of crunch is some kind of fresh kind of nut. You can use walnuts as what they use at the restaurant. I've got some shaved almonds here, so that's what I'm gonna use. I would love to have had a blue cheese or a feta cheese on hand, but I don't have that, so I'm just gonna do a light sprinkle of Parmesan, and that's just gonna give it a little bit of extra something. How beautiful is that? Okay, and now for our last recipe. This is truly my go-to pasta because it's so easy and it tastes so good. First thing I gotta do is I gotta get my water boiling. That way I can get that pasta in, because that's what's gonna take the longest, and that's what's gonna hold me back from not hitting my 20 minutes or less. For this recipe, I'm not gonna use a fresh garlic, which I typically would, but I want you to see that it's okay to use a store-bought garlic. It's okay to use a pre-minced garlic. If that makes you cook more at home, then that's what you need to do. It's also okay if you use something like a dry garlic. The biggest thing is that we wanna make sure that you're trying to cook at home and and you got to start somewhere. Now this bonus recipe, I guarantee you this can be done in 10 minutes or less. And if you have to, you can do it in a microwave. It's one of my favorite quick and easy individual pizzas. All right, I got me a little pizza pan. You can also just do it straight on the rack. Got my store-bought cheap pizza sauce. And what I'm using here, and this is one of these little hacks that I found, and this is a store-bought pita bread. I just find that these little pitas work so great. I've got it on low broil. Broil, that's the one good thing is it starts really quick. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in here and kind of pre-cook this pita. And what it's gonna do is just gonna give it a little bit of texture, get it cooking to start off with, and then I'll come back, dress it, and throw it back in. And then, as always, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. It's not too hot. We cook a lot of vegetarian dishes, not because, you know, I'm opposed to meat or don't like meat. It's just meat's fairly expensive. And sometimes throwing in a couple of vegetarian meals like this one can really help save some dollars. Before I get ready to take my pizza out and dress it up, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and get this sauce going. And what I'm using is a cherry tomato. Now these are like different colored cherry tomatoes, a lot of different flavors. I found that this one's just a really unique flavor, and it just makes a pasta sauce that's a little bit different than what you may traditionally have, just because of the different flavors, the different colors. Feel free to just use a regular cherry tomato. It works just as good. It's great. I just had these on hand, and so I thought, oh, this will be fun. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just cover this up, let that cook on that kind of medium-low heat. Pasta I'm gonna use a bow tie pasta. Use whatever you got on hand. It works great with all of them. Oh, quick note too, I did salt the water. Always salt your pasta water, give you more flavor. Okay, so we're on the home stretch here. We're on the last bit of this recipe. Now, I don't have a masher. Well, I do have a masher, but you know, got reorganized. It's not here. So what I gotta do is I gotta crush these tomatoes up and let that sauce continue to stew. Oh, that's looking great. So I've already taken the pasta off. It's done. It's ready. Now you can see it's really cooked down into something that looks more like a pasta sauce. It's kind of like a little bit chunky, which is perfect. Add it right here into the pan, nice and al dente. Put a little bit of that water in there, so I know I'm good. Go ahead and add all this pasta because I know I'm gonna need it. Okay, so now for the last thing that I'm gonna add to this, I'm gonna turn my heat off and I'm gonna add a little bit of cream. I use half and half, a little bit of fresh parm. Beef it up and finish with some herbs. As you can see, the pizza dish really has a lot of color and it's really tasty, packed full of flavor, and it's super, super easy. Also the pasta. Our pasta's done, it's all finished. That little bit of heavy cream or that little bit of half and half really does make this better. I always say that with any pasta dish, the two main things you want to make sure you have is al dente pasta, and you want to make sure that you put a little bit of cream. So there you have it, 3 dishes under 20 minutes and that one bonus dish that I know you can make in 10 minutes. If you like these recipes and you want to see me do more of these 20-minute recipes, let me know in the comments. 4 recipes in about an hour and 40 minutes, I'm pretty tired. What is that? Oh, I think I hear the babies.